Okay, well, so... Hello. Breaker 19, how are you? Okay, so start off, I'd like to acknowledge that this is obviously a very controversial topic. It's not a legal study in the West. The West has sort of eradicated these studies since the 60s, and there's also indigenous scholars who aren't really too happy about the idea of taking these sacred medicines and putting them in academic settings. So I'd like to acknowledge both of those parties and help us move to the next step, which is exploring these really important tools that we can all work with and that are very transformative. Like Adrian, first I'd like to say a little something for Megan being the sexy creamy middle between the entheogen sandwich. But Adrian and I are both kind of in the same spot where we've had some transformative experiences. I mean, obviously Adrian, maybe even to a much larger degree. And we realize that there's something here that it's not something to be toyed around with. And we want to give whatever we can to help these things be eradicated from the prohibition that it's under right now, which is basically that we can't study them. We can't do research in the US with them. If it is, it's mostly very, very high-risk studies, studies that aren't exactly looked highly upon in many academic settings. Even places like CIS, it's challenging to work with this type of stuff. So it's something to think about. If you're working with entheogens and it's kind of a side project for you, maybe kind of push that up to the front, because as you'll see, there's a lot of really, really amazing information that's coming out, some research that has been done. So anyway, let's start off. That was kind of my setup. But first question is, why build a school like this? Why even take this out of nature and put it into an academic setting? What does that come? And I think for me, the first thing that I thought about was that we need to have as many different opportunities to attack policy as possible. Right now, there's MAPS, and their sort of their approach to policy is medicinal usage. So there's MDMA and PTSD. There's obviously Boga and addiction therapy, Ayahuasca and alcohol addiction. All these things are showing some really valuable results. The next sort of policy attack is the Council on Spiritual Practices, which is basically saying that we have a religious right to work with these entheogens, and it's sort of it's something that that people feel have transformed them. A lot of people feel that they have a spiritual practice that is an entheogenic plant teacher. So to kind of go and kind of look at it from the religious freedoms point of view is sort of my personal interest, but I realize that there has to be more than just two ways to attack. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of explore entheogenic education. And what that would do, of course, would let us work on our right to the pursuit of happiness, our constitutional right to pursue whatever we want to pursue. And what this also does is it creates a container for the explorers and the seekers that are out there that don't have this container in the West. So the benefits and the validity of this type of work. Well, to start off, there's a couple different really interesting research projects that have been done in the past. Penke did a research project in the 60s, which was on mysticism and psilocybin. He found that he had a very high rate of mystical experience coming from people that were working with psilocybin. However, the study was done in a church with theology students on Good Friday in the basement. So obviously there's some reasons, maybe other than the psilocybin, that caused the mystical experience. Roland Griffiths actually just finished a study in 2006 where he worked with people as well with psilocybin. He found that 22 of the 36 people that he worked with had a complete mystical experience according to the mystical rating scale. Of these people, over 60% of them said it was the top 5 most personally meaningful experience in their life, and 10-12% said it was the most meaningful experience. And this was rated amongst getting married, the birth of their children, et cetera, et cetera. So these are really, really powerful experiences that people are having some really transformative moments, and yet at the same time we're finding that it's illegal to study. Another study that was done, of course, those results also held over 14 months. So he re-questioned everybody after 14 months and found that, yes, indeed, these held. Rick Strassman had done a lot of work in the 90s with DMT. And actually on the back of the page here, I have an interesting documentary that he was a part of called DMT, the Spirit Molecule. And in that, he talks about his process and working with people. And of those people, almost 100% of them had out-of-body experiences, saw different realms, alien entities, et cetera, et cetera. So all these different experiments are being done and showing us a world that we have never really been able to explore with any other technique or method. And this is something that, as it's sort of breaking through the Western model, we're starting to see that there's some benefits to these studies. One of the people that's done probably the most intense work, specifically with ayahuasca, is Shanon. He's written a book called Antipodes of the Mind, which has over 1,200 different experiences, which he kind of maps out and kind of gauges according to his experiences, different types of knowledge or different sort of types of visions that come from these experiences. In fact, Shanon says that ayahuasca is not a one-shot affair, but rather a long-term course of study. It's a school. And he observed that the different types of knowledge from these experiences were philosophical, metaphysical, specialized shamanic knowledge, natural knowledge, psychological knowledge, creative artistic knowledge. So he's showing that by using these different medicines, you're actually able to find and grab pieces of knowledge that you may never have come across before. An interesting study that was done in 1966, which personally I think would be really a great way to sort of bring some more of these creativity studies back to the forefront. James Philemon did a study about creativity and technical problem solving. So he worked with people with really deep technical problems, scientists, mathematicians, things of that nature, and while they were working on the problems, had them work with these different medicines. Unfortunately, after he had some really great results and a bunch of patents came out of the study, the government shut him down. So that's kind of a bummer. But he claims one became a vice president of a major technical corporation. Another has won virtually every major scientific award that the computer world offers. And he says, the irony, of course, is that it's totally acceptable to the culture because these are problems that people wanted to work on, things that mattered to them. So, of course, that asks the question, imagine in a place where people could work with these on problems that really mattered to them and see what kind of creative ideas can come out of it, what kind of breakthroughs can come. Some people that I've worked with, these psychedelics or entheogens that have already come up with some pretty amazing sort of breakthroughs were Francis Crick. Obviously, he worked with the DNA structure. He's known to have been inspired by LSD. Nobel Prize winning chemist Carrie Mullis admitted to Albert Hoffman, the inventor of LSD, that LSD had helped him develop the polymerase chain reaction that helps amplify specific DNA sequences. LSD itself actually helped to some brain neurochemists to discover serotonin because there were a lot of similarities between the two chemical structures. So after knowing all this and sort of digging into sort of the knowledge and personally knowing how much I've learned from these plants, I started to read a little bit on Kenneth Tupper, who actually just defended his dissertation today, so hopefully he's doing all right with that. His whole thing is on education and policy. And so he's talking about these plants as educational tools, as cognitive tools, and one of the things he talks about is Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence, and one part of that is the area of existential intelligence, which he kind of really opens up. But what I noticed throughout his entire paper was that every time he was talking about this and going through policy, everyone would ask him, well, what happens then? Let's say this is legal, then what? You're going to give LSD to 8th graders? Like, how does that work? And I realized that there's no framework for what's next. So that's really also another inspiration for this, and for any of you that would like to help with this brainstorming idea. How do we create a framework that people that are trying to break their way through policy can point to, that's mature, that's scholarly, that's academic, but still respects all the traditions that it comes from? Other types of institutions that have kind of worked with educational entheogens at its core, Wasiwaska, which is a place in southern Brazil, Cayamare, which is in northern California, in a way Burning Man is that as well. But to have a bunch of people come together and learn from each other off of these experiences. But all these experiences are very short term. They're very sort of 2-week, 3-week, 4-week intensives. So I was curious what it would look like to have a larger intensive, a larger postgraduate study program, if you will. So this is where the brainstorming comes in, and if you'd like to help out later, here's the sheets for that. So to start off, I figured it'd be good to sort of frame what this would look like. I'm thinking of it as a graduate level or advanced level study. For this grad school, I think it would be important to have somebody to have at least 15 to 30 experiences, just to kind of get your feet wet, because if you're going to be going through a very intensive program like this, it's very good to know sort of the range of what you are working with, and rather than getting 2 years into a program and realizing that this stuff is not what you're looking for, because it isn't for everybody, and it's definitely going to be drawing certain people. And then I also probably would have a beginner's program as well, but not as intense as the grad level. The orientation campus, I think if I was to build a campus, something like this, it would be similar structure to Orville or Burning Man, or the galactic structure I was speaking of earlier, with the central point and then everything around it. But the central point would be the garden, where everyone grows the plants. So my interpretation, as you sort of come into the orientation, you would plant your range of plants inside here, whether it be mushrooms or peyote or ayahuasca plants or whatever else, and kind of watch them grow from the start. Really truly sink into what these plants are all about, from the seedling to the plant to the preparation. Part of the initial entrance into this campus would be obviously to work with orientation, how to sit for people. I think the community aspect is really important here, working with each other, building that community and that presence, and being able to work on the campus together. I think it has to be a live on campus because of that factor. It has to be something that everyone can go to and be around everyone else in case they have these experiences that are so heavy that they need to tell someone. As far as the tracks are concerned, well, I figured there'd be two main ideas. We'd have parallel tracks and then the intensive plant tracks. For the parallel tracks, that would be creative tracks. There's art, music, dance, humanities, philosophy, spirituality, but during the course of these tracks, there would be usage of entheogens and third core. The intensive plant tracks, this is sort of where I've done a little bit more sort of seeking. It'd be, in my opinion, one major plant, which would be the plant that would, and I don't want to say major minor to take away from one plant or the other, but a major plant would be a plant that would be for voyaging or soul journey, and then two minor plants to work in conjunction with the major plants for healing, cleansing, diet, purging, etc., etc. I look at the plant intensive as being at least a 4-year commitment plus a 1-year internship. The first year would be orientation with the plant basics, permaculture, how to grow, the mythologies of the plant, the cosmology of the plant, etc. The second year would be strictly with the plant teachers. There would be a section of the school that would be sort of cordoned off and sort of be an independent plant and student relationship area. So you spend an entire year working with papers, writing with papers, and writing papers to sort of integrate your experience. And then after the second year is done and you've sort of had your experience, the third year would be theory and integration, working with different philosophical theories, psychological theories, etc., and how to integrate these experiences. And then the fourth year would be therapy, guiding, things of that nature. I think it'd be also important to have 1-year internship as somebody graduates, to stick around the school and work with the children or the students that are coming up. So, the types of teachers, I think that it would be really nice to have a mix of academic professors and also elders from different traditions. Obviously, there are some issues with having an academic institution with elders because of it being an academic institution, but I think to have this mix of people would be really good for the students to learn from both sides. And the types of classes that I could see in a university like this, something like spagyrics, which is plant alchemy, how to refine the plants into tinctures and brews. Wasson theory, which is the theory that sort of the entheogens have sort of initiated or have caused the origin of religion. Maybe a class on the Rig Veda, Book 9, which is all in Soma, which a lot of people don't talk about, even though the entire book's on Soma. A class on permaculture and gardening, maybe in a master gardening certificate. I think it's really important to be really into the growth aspect of the plants and really see how every part of it works, from what you're putting into the soil, what's coming out of the soil, how you're making the plant work. And I'd like to do maybe a class on basic plant biochemistry. That's my personal interest because I think, like I said, the DMT element, why it's in our brain, I'm sure you'll learn this eventually, but we have DMT in our brain, and DMT is a basic precursor or postcursor of most of these different entheogens once they get broken down. Anthropos of the Mind, for me personally, Shanon's book was very, very sort of a breakthrough book. So to actually break it down, to look at every different aspect of his, add to it, add to the experiences. Classic entheogenic shamanism, which we actually had here with Philemon Bustos. Basic theoretical quantum mechanics and consciousness, dealing with Hameroff ideas or Penrose ideas, I think that'd be great. Systems theories, depth psychology, meditation, yoga, holistic sexuality type classes, maybe even working with the entheogens and holistic sexuality, which is very powerful from experience. And then for the post-internship, I think that'd just be really an important part of it to keep the community together. You know, somebody spends 4 years learning at a university like this, and then they just get booted out to the street without keeping that community. I think for a situation like that, you know, there wouldn't be pay, but it'd be free room and board. You'd be helping the other students, and you sort of get a really good hang of what's going on in this community. So that's pretty much about the gist of my lecture. I again want you to know that this was about a brainstorming, and I don't want to sit up here and pretend like I know what I'm doing or anything like that. I want to know that I just basically give a speech to motivate others that might be interested in this type of topic. And if you are, please help, because I think there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of really, really, really interesting consciousness studies that can come out of these, and different types of experiments, plus deep transformative work. So, yes. Thank you for letting me be nervous.
Larry, I was just wondering, is there somewhere on the planet right now where you think this could be done?
I don't know the laws around the planet, but I do know that, Colombia is pretty open. I know Brazil just changed their law recently, so it can only be done with religious usage only. The US has got a long ways to go, but people like Kenneth Tucker are really sort of breaking through that policy thing, so hopefully that'll change. He's in Canada though, so maybe that's somewhere that would go a little better. Other than that, I'm not really sure where something, the beauty of being at this school is sometimes we can dream about things that aren't really available at the moment. So, I think by envisioning it, we can make it happen, hopefully. Anybody else? Yes?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Anybody interested in this needs to, we need to keep a long-term perspective, because things like this don't happen. MAPS, Rick Dublin's been working for like 20 years plus on trying to just get MDMA approved for therapeutic use. That's 20 years and it's just one drug.
Right. Well, the positive thing about that, I actually visited MAPS 10 years ago or 12 years ago when they were in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they were in a room as big as a stage with files up to the wall. And so in 10 years, they went from that to a 20-some thousand person conference in Santa Cruz or San Jose, so that's not too bad. And so we have to give props to that. But yeah, I think it is a long-term process, and I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. But I think the more and more people that put this to the forefront of their studies instead of the hidden underground study will help that. Oh, also one more thing I'd like to mention is that we are doing a entheogenic research discussion group, 1 week Monday, 1 week Wednesday. If you're interested in working with that, please let me know. I'll get you on the email list. We have a listserv. It's a great group of people. It's really nice to be able to throw ideas around, talk about theories, talk about integration, talk about other things like that. So if you're interested in something like that, it is available. It's just, yes.
I'm really happy that you shared with us as an artist and as, I think, a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Would you consider sharing a little bit more of your own phenomenology around this vision? What is your subjective experience that you're hoping will be put out in form in this university? What's the meaning for you personally with this? If you wouldn't mind sharing some more, visionary.
The meaning for me, I guess, is going to be different for everybody, because if if I'm a mathematician and I'm really curious about how to fix this problem, my meaning for going into an entheogenic experience is going to be different than someone that's going into some deep transformative work. I'm personally interested in creativity. I think that through healing, this is personal theory, that through healing one becomes more creative through these types of healings and can sort of express that. And obviously this was shown sort of with Philemon in that brief study that he did. But you know, it's different for everybody. You know, I mean, somebody might go there. I mean, every experience that I've had has been different too. So sometimes I go and I do deep healing work from who knows when, and another time I'm thinking about the future, another time I'm with the gods and goddesses, another time in the lava pits of hell, and you know, I mean, who knows, you know, you kind of open up to the plant teacher and allow for her, or sometimes him, to take you wherever they want to take you, please, for me. Yes, Keith. Okay. Yes, yes.
Let's remember that although it took maths 20 years to get to where it is, most of that progress has happened recently in the past few years. It's a matter of changing zeitgeist. They were just holding the candle through the long, dark years of oppression. But at the maths conference last year, everybody was ecstatic because you could just feel that the energy was changing and things were beginning to open up. So now is the time for us to hold that vision and establish, you know, a visionary, energetic tunnel that will guide us into the future. In terms of where we could do this now, in reference to Evogaine, while it's illegal in the U.S. and Belgium, there are about 8 or 10 countries that actually have active Evogaine treatment going on, including Mexico and Canada, either side of us. Any of those might be open. The other thing is we have to consider the fears of the the establishment around this, and so if we suggest to them that, well, we want entheogens legalized, but we're going to confine it to this particular campus, there'll be heavy safeguards and like that. You know, that'll be like the MAPS thing of we're going to confine it to clinical study and research. So they won't think that we're just handing it out on the street corners for everybody to do everywhere, like back to the 60s, but that there'll be a specialized campus where people who want to indulge in, not just people who are like totally about entheogens, but people who want to, as part of their research, the mathematician you mentioned, can go to a place where there's an established container and a lot of guidance to assist them in a creativity project. That might go over. And when we point out, you know, how much has been done in Silicon Valley and whatnot with that kind of support, then they can see that there's actually value to the larger society.
And you're also building a really nice container that when people do have those experiences, they can integrate into community, you know, which is an important part of it. And actually, I just got an email speaking more about the MAPS thing, that there's actually just a conference in the UK on psychedelics and a whole ayahuasca track as well. And we just got an email on it, and there's really great studies going on. So it's getting there, it's getting there, it's getting there. So if this is an interest of yours, please push it forward. Yes?
And I also wanted to suggest that there's a lot of places that actually you can get some either training on whatever area you want to do on entheogen. Peru has 2 places, they're like in Pucallpa, that are not known, but one is for therapeutic purposes, and the other one is and the other one is for artistic purposes. So one of the things that I would suggest is, as we create, like Dr. Shakuntavas, that want to create this and bring it here, you know, as a
To look at those
hopefully
models.
legal aspects and things like that, we can still be going in different places and either training or getting our own experiences. And it's almost like we don't need to just wait. I mean, we could have a center as we're waiting for those things, and also do it where it's legal already, and then we can be very open about it and learn from years of people that have been doing that.
Yeah, right. And that's where I was speaking with teachers, you know, like how do we bring
Absolutely.
all the knowledge that we can while keeping respectful.
And there's a lot of people that are bridging already. It's not only like let's say in South American countries, there are scholars that are bridging the gap between the traditions and the scholarly work. So they're already there. So it's also like not just bringing indigenous people
Sure.
as well as the ones that are already mixed.
Let's take a break. This can continue during the break if you'd like.